is Jerry Anna Henaris. I am 22 years old, newly turned 22, newly 22, newly married, loving life, and I'm in Sydney, Australia. I was born and raised in the Philippines though. I was born and raised to two of the most beautiful people. They were the most beautiful parents, and we were a pastor's family. So we still are a pastor's family. My dad and my mom are pastors of a church back home. Amazing pastors, and they're amazing parents. And so what I'm about to tell you has nothing to do with me having parents who didn't do their job or anything like that. It's just decisions that I made along the way. I was born and raised in a Christian family, and I loved God. I had my little devotions. I couldn't fall asleep without doing my devotions as an 11-year-old, waking up and praying and worshiping. I love worship above all. When I reached to 12, 13 years old, I remember so clearly I was getting into something that I thought was completely innocent, completely normal for my age. I remember so clearly, I've only heard God's audible voice, I think once or twice, but this is definitely the one time that I remember so clearly, and all I could hear, I remember in the bathroom while I was thinking about this thing, he said no. Me being a smarty pants, I was like, well, God, I love you so much, and I'm at church every single service, and I just want to do this thing. I want to be a normal 13-year-old. I want to be a normal teenager. I want to do what I want. So I went on with that, and it was about four years of something that was very toxic for me. I was stuck in it, and it had completely got me into the early stages, I would say, of depression, being very anxious all the time, being unhappy, being fake. I think I was 15 or 16, that I didn't want to eat anything because I had body shaming issues like anorexia. I don't want to call it that, but really I was the skinniest girl, and so I would remember working out 3 times a day as a 15-year-old and barely eating anything, and then if I did eat something, there would just be so much shame and guilt, and it was something that was so toxic. But my whole life was just, I thought at that time, because it was 4 years of those, from when you're in high school, those are the years that kind of really develop you. I had been so caught up in that thing, and I was so stuck and thought that I couldn't get out. And the worst bit is that no one knew around me what I was going through. People could see signs that I was going through stuff, like my mom and some of my closest friends, because they noticed, Jerry, what's going on? I've noticed this. I would always lie because I was so ashamed. People always looked at me as the girl who's got it all together, and she's a worship leader, she's a connect group leader, and I just couldn't come clean because I was like, I'm so ashamed of myself, and what are they gonna think of me, and this and that. Maybe a year into those 4 years, I started getting really depressed, and it would just take me on a toll emotionally and even mentally. And then I remember starting having thoughts well, you should kill yourself, and can I just say that those thoughts are not thoughts, they're lies in your head. And if you don't speak up to those lies, if you don't come against those lies or those thoughts or whatever you hear in your head, if you don't shut them up, they will shut you up. And so I just never addressed them, because I knew that if I had to address those thoughts and those lies in my head, then I had to let go of this thing, because this thing was directly correlated to my depression and my anxiety, and to it was this big dark cloud over me all the time, and I couldn't be genuinely happy for 4 years. And you can go through a tough season for 2 months, 3 months, and 6 months and not be genuinely happy, but when it's built up to 4 years, it's so toxic for you. And I had no life in me. I remember my mom looking at me being like, Jerry, you look dead, what's going on? And she was so concerned, and I knew I couldn't come clean to her. And it was a year, 2, 3, on the 4th year, I was about to turn 16, and by this time I had frequently contemplating taking my own life, and I remember just for about 6 months straight, almost every night crying myself to sleep, and I couldn't show my emotions and what I was going through. I couldn't cry out loud. So every night when you cry and you tell yourself to be silent and you're keeping it all in you and you're just shaking and sobbing but without a sound, it's so bad for you, especially when it's for 6 months, you know. It was starting to give me like heart pains. I remember all the time, all of a sudden my heart would actually, like my physical heart would just like feel like it's being crushed out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I can't stand. And I was like 15 turning 16. I remember my doctor pulling me aside and being like, what's going on? Are you okay? Because there's no reason why you should be feeling this. You're so young and healthy. Like, why are you feeling this pain in your heart? And obviously me being me, I never told anyone. I never told her what I was going through. And then 2 weeks before my 16th birthday, every single night I would have a dream, someone killing me or someone after me and my family killing us. Every single night I remember running to my parents' room crying, and my mom knowing that I had another dream, and she was so worried, but I couldn't tell her what was happening. But I could sense like there's just death everywhere I went. 4 days before my 16th birthday, I remember it was June 21, I was crying at 3 a.m. in the morning because I'd found out something that day, and I was so over it. And what's the point of life? What's the point of living? And I had no hope whatsoever. I had no self-worth. That was the main thing that really left as soon as I got into this thing, was my self-worth. I had no value whatsoever. My whole value was wrapped around this thing, and so therefore if this didn't turn out well, or if something bad happened here, then I'm nothing. That was what was happening. And then and I remember looking up how much I needed to take, like how much of a certain pill I needed to take. So I got it all ready, and this is the Philippines, so we have a water dispenser, and so I take half of the dosage and I keep drinking it down. All of a sudden the water dispenser ran out of water. I think it's 5 gallons for that whole bottle. And remember, I was this skinny, like underweight little 15-year-old. I couldn't carry and refill the water, and I remember being so upset at God, so over this. I'm over life, like so angry at him. And I said, God, well fine, if you won't let me take my life, then I might as well just give it to you, like for real. 2 days later, I still went to church that Sunday. I still was leading worship. Like, I think that's what made things worse, was because lying and being so fake had been so like exhausting. Like, then my birthday comes up and nobody knew until it was the following Thursday when we had a pastor from Nigeria. He stopped in the middle of his message and he said, "Where's the third pastor's daughter here?" And I stood up and I didn't know what was happening. And he made me walk all the way to the front, and he said, "The enemy has tried so hard for you to not be standing here today." And I just, after that sentence, I just completely lost it and broke down. I don't know how long I was on the floor for. He prophesied over me and I can't remember what he said, because I was that broken. I was that much of a mess. And I just remember crying and him speaking destiny into my life, saying that I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this, and the enemy has tried to make sure that I wouldn't be standing there. And I was just a mess. After the service, everyone had gone home already and I was still like a mess. It's crazy because now recalling everything, it seems like someone else's life, because I'm such a different person now. It feels like I'm talking about my friend's life. Even the amount of pain that I had gone through emotionally, the mental issues and all that, I don't even remember as clear. It's like God took, those memories away. The crazy thing is, after that, I thought that, wow, this is God, like, this is crazy what you've done in my life. And then only to find out that when you live a life just like fully surrendered into God's hands, He has so much for you. Like, I could tell story after story after story of even how I got to Sydney, how I stayed in Sydney, how I met my husband, how, you know, God had lined things up for me that technically shouldn't have happened. And like, this is just me pouring out because God has been so good in my life. But if you're watching this and you feel like there is no hope for you, and if you feel like, you know, what's the point of living, and life just keeps knocking you down over and over and over and over again, I just, you know, I understand. I may not understand completely, but I understand what that feels like. And can I just say, you have a Father in heaven that created you. He designed you from even before you were formed in your mother's womb. You know, He designed you, and He has the best of the best for you. And He knew what He was doing when He made you. And you're not a mistake. It doesn't matter how many mistakes you do, you're not a mistake. There's no mistake that's too messy to clean up for Him. You know, He is the most excellent restorer. Like, He invented restoration. Like, talking about this story feels like I'm telling someone else's story, because it's not who I am anymore. And obviously I won't forget my past and my testimony in that area, because, you know, anything that will glorify God, I will be open about. For anyone that may be struggling with hope or even just the future, Jeremiah 29:11, I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a future and a hope. He has designed a future for you, and you just surrender it all to Him, and you see Him work in your life, and you see Him mending you back together, and you see Him, you know, working out all things for the good. You may be falling apart, but you're falling apart in His hands, and life is worth living.